Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on the show. In today's episode, my guest is Heather Redisch, and I wanted to provide a warning here before we get going, because Heather and I will be discussing her very personal experience as a participant in the 4th of July parade shooting here in Highland Park a few years ago. I will be providing time signatures in my show notes, so if you'd like to avoid listening to that segment, you can do so. Heather and I recorded this episode last summer, so you will be hearing us talk about camp and things that happened last summer. I'm so grateful that she agreed to be on the show. She's one of my favorite people, and I hope that you enjoy listening to our conversation as much as we enjoyed having it. Thank you so much for your support of my podcast. I really appreciate all of your comments, emails, text messages. It really does brighten my day. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to The Real and the Woo. I'm your host, Lauri Stern. Join me as I invite experts and friends to discuss a range of topics, from the factual and practical to the mystical and magical. Consider this your virtual happy hour filled with lively, authentic, and meaningful conversations meant to inform, inspire, and ignite your curiosity. Whether you are very real or super woo, this podcast is just for you. Welcome to The Real and the Woo with Lauri Stern. I am your host, Lauri Stern, and I'm here with my guest today named Heather Redisch. Say hi, Heather.
Hi.
And I was so excited to have you come on the show for so many reasons. This is one of those full circle experiences in a couple of ways, actually. Yeah. And so for those of you who are out there, you can't see us, but you can hear us. Heather was my eldest daughter's camp counselor. So when Emily was 3 or 4, I want to say. Yeah.
Yep,
and now
4.
she's 30. And
you're making us sound old.
Yeah, I know. Well, so we don't look old at all. And that's when I first really fell in love with your whole entire demeanor and energy. And even at that young age, how old were you then?
I was probably about 15 at the time.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I went to camp. You went, your kids go to camp. We think of our counselors as these grandparents practically. And when you think about the responsibility they have, we don't for one second get behind that ski boat. We don't think about it. We don't think about we're going to Colorado with a bunch of 16-year-olds who are supposed to be in charge.
Right. Yes.
That's the magic of camp.
It's the magic of camp, and it's a beautiful
camp. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. And as we get older, we see that the age gap tightens. And so, it's an interesting evolution of how everyone, continues to grow. And I know when I talk about Emily, like getting married now and just remembering her little curls, like your hair, like her tight little curls.
Yeah.
It seems pretty incredible that, that this is how time has moved.
Yeah, time moves too quickly. And you've got 3 daughters of your own. And are they at camp right now?
I have one at overnight camp right now. One should be home in an hour from sports camp. She did overnight camp first 4, and she's doing sports camp second 4. And then my oldest, who's going to high school, she's been nannying this summer for a family.
Oh,
so
that's awesome. Yeah. Would this be her gap year between like camp and maybe being a counselor? If that's the kind of camp she goes to? Okay.
Yeah, you can't. She's been a CIT for a number of years, and you can't get a work permit until you are 15 and be a counselor. So she's in this kind of funky year. So
yeah.
Next year will be when she can go full steam.
And she'll go back to where she goes to camp to be a counselor.
Oh, no, not overnight camp. I'm talking about day camp. The day camps here, you have to be 15 or 16 years old. So overnight camp, you're not a counselor until you're probably a junior in high school.
Yeah, right. And that's when we're trusting people to drive ski boats.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And I was in love with every single one of my ski boat drivers, by the way.
Of course you were. Same with me. Everyone, male or female. I thought they were the coolest human beings on the planet.
There was one summer, we graffiti the cabins, and I don't even think for a long time they never painted over them from summer to summer. I went to camp in Missouri, and there was one summer, I swear it was like Lauri plus. It was like probably 10 names.
But it makes being a camper, it's a very sacred time, in their lives right now, especially, one thing that really is important to me as a mom of 3, teenagers, if you will, is that their reliance on their phones and their technology is so intense. And so to have this forced break to allow them the time to reconnect with friends, learn how to have those conversations face to face, work through their struggles, counselors alike, even though counselors have their phones, they're definitely not on it as much as they usually are. And that environment now to me has become even more sacred than ever, because it's helping solve some problems that we have right now in the world that we can't seem to get a full control of. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, thank God, really, that I was lucky enough to go to camp, because there were some summers we almost couldn't afford to send me.
Yeah.
And it was like my world would have fallen apart. I'm such a firm believer in camp for so many reasons. First of all, the self-esteem that we develop, I know I did, just away from school, right? It's not that you're going to reinvent yourself. It's that I found myself so that I could walk back into school a whole different level of confidence. And, school breeds all those labels in one direction or another, to the positive and the negative. But at camp, I was the girl who could water ski, and I was doing all the sports. And it was just such a gift, truly a gift.
Yeah.
And, just what you're saying about the disconnecting from, social media and the rules around that. I love the idea. I only sent my kids to camp for 4 weeks in the summer. That's what I did. And as a parent, I was very firm. I said, summertime is meant to be boring sometimes. We're so overscheduled. I want you to have time to do a lanyard under a tree. I want you to have time to do nothing and be bored. Like, why are we so afraid of allowing our kids to be bored? It's because I feel some parents, I don't think you or I are like this, they don't know what to do with their kids. And they themselves want to have camp for themselves all the time. They don't want to deviate from their schedule, their whatever that is. And they're allowed to do that. But I find everybody needs to take a pause every once in a while and do absolutely nothing but contemplate your navel. Like, when's the last time you looked at that? What is even in there? Lint?
Right. Yes.
You gotta take some time to look.
and when you're bored, sometimes your best ideas are able to come forward. I mean, again, and we could bring this into even a yoga discussion, which is it's that reset, it's that centering. And when you allow yourself to get quiet, which is really hard to do, especially kids, it's really hard for them to get quiet. But when they get quiet, it forces them to, to figure out a way to not be bored. And when we were kids, the way we wouldn't be bored is by leaving our house, going outside, finding friends, playing on the streets, playing. But that is also kind of taken an evolution because, which I don't know if I'm a big fan of The Anxious Generation by John Haidt. Have you heard of his book?
No, I'm going to write that down and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, here. This is the book. It's next to my desk always. So It's The Anxious Generation. And he is all over social media actually right now. He is really to me, ground zero of shifting our culture into letting go of the phones at an early age. So he has successfully this summer gotten Los Angeles public school system. I think he's working on New York right now. There's a couple other school systems that are banning phones in school or in the classroom. And so I have a lot of thoughts on that. My initial thought being that I am a survivor of gun shooting is that the kids want their phones because, God forbid, there is a shooter you want to be able to have. But that's really, truthfully, 90% of the time what you're not, or 95 or 99, hopefully not what you're needing it for. So to be able to walk into your teacher's classroom and dock your phone, or have that, that rule where you do not have access to your phone during the course of your classes or during whatever that might be. These kids are so uncomfortable not holding their phones. And even teachers have commented that when the kids are sitting in their seats, they're like watching where their phone is like in the cubby hole across the classroom because they are that uncomfortable with it. So we need to start creating this new feeling of I can separate from my phone and not be so controlled by it. So anyway, so he had a really interesting, I'll send it to you later, but he had a really interesting, he's spoken about it quite a few times, which is he puts a bunch of parents in the room, someone like, kids that are my age with kids that are about similar in age as my kids. And he says to the parents, he says, how old were you when your parents let you go play outside? And everyone kind of looks around, and most people come up with about 6 years old, 6, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that little. And that was when my parents let me go run down the street and find my friends and knock on their doors. And he said, and so now that you're raising kids around similar age, how old are you letting your kids? And everyone looks at each other and they're like, I don't know, like 12, 10, 12. And he says, exactly. So you went out to explore the world and to be bored, but figuring out ways outside to not be bored. And now you're not letting your kids out till they're close to 12 because you're so nervous that they're going to get kidnapped or something awful is going to happen to them. But meanwhile, you're letting your kid go into their bedroom with their phones or their iPads, and there are absolutely no guardrails on that. And we know that there's predators all over that, but yet you're fine with them going in their room and closing the door, but yet you won't let your kid out of the house earlier than 12 years old. And it was an epiphany moment for me because I was like, yeah, you know what? I should let my 9-year-old feel free to walk the streets. And if she knows, how to cross the street and look both ways, and like, why am I so nervous about it? And it's that shift, but it's the truth. Like that's how you learn and that's how you grow. And so, and those kids who really were in puberty learning about the smartphone when the smartphone was coming out in 2007, the kids who were about 13, 14, I don't know if those are any of your kids, they're close. Those are the kids who were our experiment. They went to Mars, as John Haidt says, and we didn't even know they were going to Mars, which Mars is the smartphone. And from there, they were going through puberty. They were entering the smartphone, and now they are entering our workforce. And those kids are the kids who were born and raised on the smartphone. And that is a new generation to enter our workforce now. They did not have that play time that they should have. And none of our kids beyond that time, beyond the smartphone coming out, have really had that kind of play time. So I know that was a very long-winded answer for you with a lot of twists and turns.
No, it's but it all kind segue.
Of, it all is like, it's about the phones really, and how the kids have all adapted, and the parents too.
Right. So putting that in a box just for now, because I mean, that can be a whole podcast. I'd love to have you back to talk about that, because obviously I'm just a little older than you are. And Emily can attest, and Noah too, and my twins as well, who are now 23. They basically gave us a PowerPoint presentation. With Emily, it was her friend, she and her friend back in the day, it was poster boards, why they should have a phone. And this is in 8th grade. Like, we were no phones until then, because that's typically when around here, at least then, you kind of need it for the bar bat mitzvah circuit or whatever else. And so, we can put a pin in that, because I know my experience is vastly different just in the short span of time you and I are raising kids. And obviously, you and I live in the community. July 4th happened here. And I wanted to touch on that in a moment. I can touch on it now. A couple of things. I want to get back to the segue, first of all, of your business now. And I want to talk about, perhaps you've already said it, why you were guided to open your business. And I'm going to let you say what it's called. But it seems to me that you are, I know your email's Talent Maven, which was your previous business.
Yeah.
But your current business, I think your Talent Maven side is identifying just how these kids are now coming out of college, graduating into the workforce, having maybe a different skill set than you would expect as an employer because of the smartphones, because of the way they've been raised. I would submit they've been raised in a lot of fear, understandably, but whether the best job as parents we've done to shield and protect them from walking the streets before they're 12 does something internally to their DNA we don't even know, just like you said, Mars. So our fears, whether we discuss them or not, are felt in the atmosphere. How those fears manifest in reality of you're 6 years old, you need to leave the house with a phone, you can't leave the house. Going into the classroom, I have to have my phone. What if there's a shooter? Like living our life with that baseline of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's experts way smarter than I am. It's almost like we're in a little bit of a war zone. And I do not mean to at all minimize actual war zones, but I think there's degrees of trauma when you're faced with it on a daily basis. And I know we might be talking about a fancy problem. Oh, my kid uses his or her phone too much. But in terms of the damage that does to a child's self-esteem, the suicide rate, on and on and on and on, it's the evil that we know, and we have to deal with it. And so I want you to hop off this topic for a second to segue into the fine and amazing new work you're doing to help this generation navigate. I just got the chills, so that means I'm on the right track, to navigate their lives because of how they've been raised, again, with the best opportunities they were given, with the best intentions of their parents to keep them safe, happy, and secure. But if that was fear-based, it's kind of false. And so how are you finding these young adults coming out have the wherewithal to navigate the world they're in? Do they have the same set of self-confidence that you or I might have had? And maybe we had self-confidence because we had to sink or swim.
Yep.
And I feel like sometimes that over coddling doesn't allow, I think about Jack Nicholson, you need me on that wall. You want me on that wall. And it's like, you need to have somebody on the wall. And what I want our kids to understand is they need to be on that wall for themselves. It's not their parents they can rely upon the rest of their lives. It's not their friends. It's not their phone. So you need to put them on a wall. And I feel like that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So where to begin? So yes, I started the Talent Maven. My background is in HR, operations, executive recruiting, talent management. That's what I've done for the last 25 years. And I would say in the last 5, which is around the COVID situation too, as I was interviewing recent grads to move into jobs just for clients of mine, I had been noticing just this decline in confidence, decline in how to even navigate a job search, decline in what it all looks and feels like to them after college. And the way I describe this business is that I had a moment. The way I've explained it to others is like, it must feel a little bit like Taylor Swift when she wants to write a song, like it just kind of flows through her. And when I was actually like in the middle of building my website and building all my content and going through this, I had this thought, like, I wonder if this is how singers are when they write songs, like personal songs that just come through them. There's got to be something to that. Like, I really felt that. And that is what I keep coming back to every time I start getting a little frustrated or, building a business is really hard. It's really hard. And sticking to it and being consistent, it's really, really hard. So, but I keep coming back to that moment to myself to say, it went through you. Like, there is a purpose here. It would not have come through you like that if not. So with that being said, Adulting 101 Masterclass is helping kids bridge the gap from college into adulthood in a myriad of different ways, in how to find a job and how to set themselves up for success when looking for a job, in interviewing, in their resume, LinkedIn. Also, it's talking about financial literacy. When you receive an offer and they say it's a $70,000 offer, it's not 70,000. It's more like 55 because you get taxes taken out. So then you have to build a budget off of that, not off of the 70. You also are paying your health insurance, and you should be, and I scream this from the mountain, top, starting to invest in a 401k at a very early age. To have one less beer at the bar, or one less glass of wine, or buy one less thing for yourself, and put that money towards your 401k, because as it continues to snowball, you will see later in life, it will pay off for yourself in freedom, in dividends, right?
100%.
So talking about credit cards and how you need to pay your credit cards and how to set yourself up, because having a credit card actually does give you more freedom in life eventually, but you need a good credit score. Well, the only way for you to get a good credit score is for you to have a credit card, but you need to be mindful of that, right?
Well, I don't know, right, really quick. I don't know about you. I went to Mizzou. Remind me where you went to school. You went
Wisconsin, Madison.
Right. And, there were tables, I remember, like in the quad, of these credit card people.
Yeah. But you thought that they were like
on us.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
And it was like a 30%, interest rate. They never said. And so I got advice of, like, just like you're saying, building credit, back in the days, even before Macy's. I mean, maybe Macy's was always here in Chicago, but in St. Louis, it was like Famous Bar or Stick, Spare, and Fuller. Just go get the department store credit card, because that was easy to get, and then do that and pay it off. And that's how I built my first line of credit. Right.
Yep.
And so that's amazing that you're helping kids do that, because they're just preyed upon.
They're preyed upon, and they don't know who to trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about that, you have taxes that you have to pay in April, and setting yourself up in your terms of your paycheck of ensuring either that you're paying a little bit of your taxes every paycheck, or are you going to get hit with a super bill in April, and have you budgeted your money for a super bill, right? Also discussing mental health, and that big transition into adulthood takes a real toll on relationships, friendships, your family, your relationships with your parents. Like, there's a lot. And also time management. How are you setting yourself up for success with having to go to a 9 to 5 every day, if that's what it is? And how do you build in time for yourself? And what does that all look and feel like? So these are all just different areas that we touch upon. I have a webinar that I give for kids, a monthly webinar that I go through all of these things. I also do one-on-one coaching for kids who want more specific, tailored information to them. And I work with companies internally on their etiquette and communication in terms of how to work with Gen Z on being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and how to get away from their screens and, have conversation that they are trying to avoid wholeheartedly by just, being on text or email or whatever it may be. So those are the different areas in which I'm working. But I just do want to say one thing, because, something that has been just kind of irking me recently, especially as I've started this journey with this company, is that you were talking about the pressure, right? The pressures of the adulthood and getting ready, and who is helping you do that. The problem really starts, in my opinion, with college. Somewhere down the line, high school became, the day you start high school became a trajectory into how are you going to get yourself into college. So when you and I were going to college, you didn't think about that until your junior year, until you had to take your ACTs or your SATs. Maybe you visited a couple of schools and you made your decision. But the minute you hit high school now, I'm going through it right now with my daughter, where actually we have been in a disagreement, because she wants to be in an honors class. I think she should take a college prep class, which is a little bit more of a junior class before the honors class. But they're always thinking about how to be able to have the edge in order to get into college, because college has become so hard to get into, and not only so hard, but so expensive. And what irks me about the whole thing now of it being so hard and so expensive is that none of these colleges are appropriately prepping their students for the real world after. So they're living their best life in college. You're in massive debt for all of the college that you have to pay for. And then your kid walks out and they're like, now what? And it's a real thing. And across the board, I'm talking about the Michigans, the Dukes, the whatever, to any school across the country. And these schools provide classes, but they are for 0 credit. So no kid is taking a 0 credit class about life skills, and they're not motivated. And so there we are. Like, so
but doesn't the high school, I feel like my kids had life skills in high school. Did they take that away also?
It's, to me, the life skills in high school, it's like too far removed. When these kids are in their final years of college, I was coaching a kid today and I was talking with her and I said, what is the one thing you're most anxious about? And she said, I'm just in denial. Like, I'm in total denial that this is happening, that I'm graduating, that I have to get a job. And I was like, it's a really big pill to swallow. But high school to me is like an even bigger denial, that they're like, I've got so much time and I'm not thinking about that. So that's why I like to really focus on my juniors and seniors in college, or just graduating, going to get the job within that year, to really understand, wait, I've got to save up money to move. Like, how much money should I be saving up based on what city I'm living in? And what are all the costs when I move and that? So, so my sweet spot is like junior, senior year of college, 1-2 years out of school, maybe more. I mean, I have friends who are like, can I take your adulting class at this point?
Yeah. So, well, right. And we talked about that. I just want to say a couple of things. One is, thank God for what you're doing. 2 is, here's my mind spinning, thinking, well, this should be absolutely a college course. And I hope that you manifest, that you become a trainer of trainers, that you fan out in the world and train people. Where I come at it is, I don't think high school and college or even any school does enough for mental health. There's some yoga classes, but my whole lens is chakras. And you're talking about kids coming out of high school and college who, just like you said, like their adolescent years are spent in turmoil. And when you think about the age group of adolescence, that is your sacral chakra moving up to your 3rd chakra. And then, of course, heart and throat. And if you have no roots, you don't feel secure. You have no idea how to express your creativity, your sexuality. That's a whole other topic. To the positive and negative, right? What's going on with gender identity and the freedom and or the pressure to identify your gender and so on and so forth. So if you lack confidence, how do you trust relationships? How do you speak and write and communicate well if all you're doing is on your phone? Not to mention tapping into your dreams and your sense of spirit, right? So 2 things. I would say that the business idea you had clearly was a download, is what you're describing. So the woo-woo part of the show is just that. Like, I know you from yoga. I know you from life. We haven't even had a chance to talk about yet, which we will, like what kind of spiritual practice you do. But that was a gift of a download. And to be open to receiving that and not question. Yes, that's absolutely how artists create songs. They wake up in the middle of the night. I wake up in the middle of the night and I create programs for my website, right? I create like podcast interviews like this one. Like, I want to have Heather. But the idea that we are really failing our kids' mental, energetic, and real life ways, I pray that will shift. The affordability of college needs to shift. The accessibility to higher education needs to shift. And the pressure. Not everyone's meant to go to college. Thank God for people who don't, right? Everybody has a role on this planet. And why we place value higher to the college graduate who might be, an asshole who can't cross the street or understand how to pay a bill, and putting less value on the bagger at our grocery store, who is, by the way, the sweetest person on the planet. I love Trader Joe's. I want to have the CEO of Trader Joe's on my show because they do magic over there. You go to Trader Joe's, they're obviously trained to say one nice thing about your haul,
right.
like, oh, it looks like you're making spaghetti for dinner. Oh, I haven't tried this dip. What are you going to use it on?
Yep.
It's just like, that's so nice.
Do you know what it is? It's communication skills. It's connecting. It's connecting 100%. With people. And sadly, but not, like, our bar is so low now that, like, when those things happen, we are uberly impressed versus it being, I'm sure there's many beautiful cultures out there that's just the way it is. That's just how they treat each other.
Hold the door open for people. It's like, now I'm shocked when that happens. I was walking the dog. You've seen me with the dog, or, Rick and I were walking the dog, and these kids were riding by on their bicycles. And out of the 4 kids that rode by, only 1 looked us in the eye and said, thank you, because we had moved aside. The other ones were just riding their bikes. And I went all indignant grandma brain, like, those kids aren't being raised right. And then the other part of me, the compassionate side, was, they might not just know better, that this is how you encounter people in the world. You are meant to look them in the eye. Although, again, what kind of fear does that create?
Yeah. So there's 2 mantras that I've had since I've started this business. One is be comfortable being uncomfortable. And the second, it's not a mantra, but the second is, it's not their fault. Like, but we have to stop complaining about it. It's not their fault that they were put on Mars, and we didn't even know they were being put on Mars. And so it's our responsibility to teach them, but not in a condescending way, in a way that they feel like, okay, I can trust this person. Or working also with managers to say, manager, like, this is how they are. This is how they learn. This is your responsibility to connect and communicate with them also. So it's not their fault.
It's not their fault.
But I don't want to give them an excuse either. Like, they need to learn these skills.
A retraining. It's a reframing. I think we're all stuck in, ideas of victim mentality through the blame game. And we don't grow from those places. Did you ever watch the show Billions? Did you watch Billions?
No, my husband does, but
okay. So
I've heard it's a great show.
So, we're talking about, basically you and I are right now solving all the world's problems. We're going to change the world, just the 2 of us, 100%. And anybody else listening is going to hop on our train and say, you go, and I'm going to go with you. And one of the things I'm so charged up about is, I like to say that I'm like the Wendy Rhodes character without the sex part. Because, I love my husband, and nothing wrong with Bobby Axelrod, but, she was placed in his company as the head shrinker. Okay. And I would make an argument to anybody on the planet, because now companies are hiring human design experts to help corporate people connect with each other. I would say you need a chakra expert, because if you don't know how your wheels turn, you can't drive your car. And human design is great also. That's another layer. Of course, psychiatry, psychology, all that stuff is another layer. There needs to be a whole army of people in any business helping them know themselves, so they can then be the better manager, the better employee. You're not here yet. I'm sure you've encountered it with your business, but from this side, being raised in the generation in which I was, you start in the mailroom and you stay there. And these kids now, it's strange if you don't hop jobs every 2 years, 3 years. And I remember when Emily was going through it, we were like, what do you mean you're going to change jobs? That won't look good on your resume. And in fact, it's become completely the opposite. And we've had to retrain ourselves to consider they're building their toolbox more quickly than we were able to. There's pluses and minuses to that. So why don't you talk about that too?
Well, it's interesting because as a recruiter and someone who's, who looks at a lot of resumes, I actually am turned off by someone who's been at the same company for 10 years, because that, to me, unless they have been promoted, unless there is some sort of promotion going on, and you can see that in the resume, it is looked at as complacent. And those who are moving every 3 to 5 years or so are moving into new companies, understanding new problems, solving new problems, being exposed to different issues, and helping in that capacity. So when you are looking at somebody who has been at one company for 10 years, doing about similar, same thing, and then another who has been at 3 different companies for 3 to 5 years, I'd pick this person, the 3 to 5 year person, because I just know that my company is going to be different than from every company that you have worked with. So at least somebody who can look at it from that lens versus someone who's only been at the same company for the last 10 years, that's going to be a much harder transition for them to integrate. So yes, that is
such a fascinating change.
And I'll say this, the generation of, and you're not in this, but this is the boomer generation. So my dad was an accountant. My mom was a teacher, right? So my dad was an accountant his whole life. My mom was a teacher her whole life. And my dad, similar in nature, it was like, I don't understand everybody's, why people move. And I think what ended up happening was the millennials, Gen X, like, I can't tell you how many 50-year-old men come to me and are like, well, now what? Like, I want to do something different, or I'm bored, or I've been in my family business and I don't want to do that anymore. And because there was this pressure for my generation to be in the same job for your whole life, and they don't want to be in the same job their whole lives. They want to evolve. They want to find, so yes. And then the really interesting thing is when you put all of these people in the same company, and you've got boomers and you've got Gen X and Gen Y and Gen Z and every millennials and the whole thing, now you've got a real issue that everybody believes that their side is the best side, and having that inner communication is really key. And boomers are really not comfortable with technology, and they can't seem to lean in completely. They've done as much leaning, I think, as they want to. Actually, my generation, I would say, is probably one of the worst, because we didn't have the phone. Now we do have the phone, and we don't know how to turn it off. We work 24/7. I'm always working in my head. Like,
me too.
Cannot turn it off.
Yeah.
It's always going on for me. There's always emails to answer. There's always things to do. I cannot turn it off. Gen Z is like, well, my mental health is really important, and I have boundaries, and you can't invade my boundaries. But then millennials or Gen X, they get annoyed because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, this is called hard work. Like, you're going to start, you can't get promoted in a minute. You're telling me you've got boundaries. And there's a lot of intergenerational fighting going on.
Well, and that's why I'm saying about just what you're describing, how amazing would it be if corporations who are housing all of these people bring in experts like you or I, both, to help each person see the perspective. Everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. But being in the gray area is uncomfortable, right? Sitting with Discomfort's a great book. And, how to really, it's more than just taking a walk in someone else's shoes. It's understanding the judgment that you have about their shoes, that they're either not the same, or you expected them to be fancier, or whatever it is. So like, you do this 101, and I was talking to you, I don't know, online or in person. I want to run classes called Parenting 101 and Grandparenting 101 for chakras and movement, because again, it's, you don't understand what kind of blind spots you have as a parent until you become one. And then you're in the sandwich between, now you're an adult raising your kids differently than your parents raised you. And now your parents come in and say, what do you mean you can't have steak? It's a 3-month-old, give her the steak, And you're like, no, actually I'm breastfeeding for a solid year. I'm not going to give her any food at all. Thank you very much. What do you mean? And so that's one part of that education. But the other part is the physical. You're a grandparent. How the F do you get up off the floor, or even get down onto the floor, right? You want to play Legos with your kids, your grandkids, you want to walk to the park with those kids. You need to get your body moving too, grandma and grandpa and mom and dad. And so there's that whole piece also that I'm charged up about, just like you said, you're charged up about. And now it's time for Joy on the Fives. Heather Redisch, in this moment, what is bringing you joy right now?
Talking to you. It is. It's bringing me a lot of joy.
Okay. The reason I do this is to cultivate more joy in everyone's life. If you listen to the trailer of the episode, every episode has this break called Joy on the Fives, because I want to imagine a world where we break for news, weather, traffic on 5 minutes to every hour. And I want to see that world include joy. Right. And now we will get back to our regularly scheduled program, because I want to deviate just a little bit about another full circle moment with you and me. So you're the counselor to my firstborn, and you and your 3 girls bought the house where my friend and her 3 girls used to live. And I just love that connection and that symmetry. And I believe that your first house was the previous house of another girlfriend of mine, who my listeners will soon come to know as my pickle crew. So I just really love that connection between you and I. And one of the things I really like to ask my guests also is, if you were to guess what someone else sees you having as a superpower, what do you think it would be? When you look at yourself in the mirror, or when you encounter someone like me on the street, what do you think I'd say to you is your superpower, or one of them?
It's so hard to self-reflect.
And we don't rehearse this. So
I would say I am the friend that anybody can rely on at any moment of any given time. I'm a fiercely loyal, outspoken person. So they know that they can always rely on me.
Yeah.
That's what I would say is my superpower.
I would agree with that. And I want to circle back to that in a moment, but I want to add my own for you. Oh. And what I love and adore about you is just yet one more way that we connect is, I believe, and I know that I'm a pretty good writer. People tell me that I am, and I know that I am, because it comes easily to me, especially when I'm making posts for my children's birthdays. And I have not yet met, until you, someone else who knows their children as complete individual humans and writes a novella every birthday about the growth of that human. It brings me tears of joy. It brings me chills of pride. And I'm not even your mother. I'm just someone who adores you. I just love that about you. Your superpower is you know your kids as they are. And you leave room for them to continue.
Make me cry.
Well, and but that's what you do for the people who see you. I would guess 100%. You see them each as an individual client for sure, but you mom on them. How can you not? You want to make their lives better. You want to make their lives easier. So I think that's your superpower.
That's exactly it. It's so funny you say that, because after I got off the phone today with one of these grads, I said to myself, I was like, I feel like they're all my children. Like anytime I'm meeting now with somebody, I feel like, okay, she's going to be now my kid. Like I'm going to worry, and I'm going to get her straight. Like I do. I mom on them. And I appreciate your kind words. I love to write. It's just, I don't know. It's something that I've really come into in adulthood. And I also look at Instagram, my personal Instagram, as my personal life journey now. And I want my kids to be able to look back at me and back at themselves and have those words and experiences there for them to reflect on and just go into their own little rabbit hole of their lives. So
that's the other thing I wanted to circle back to. There's 2 things. One thing was, and you don't have to discuss it and we can take it out.
The shooting. No, it's okay.
I want to talk about that, but you just shared, I want to say like just a week ago, or it came on my feed recently, about a mistake that you made. And so this show is the real and the woo. This is, I just made a mistake. We are real people. We are authentic people. We're raw. And what I love about you is that you're brave and you share the raw side of you. And when you're done telling these 2 stories, I'd like you to share, if you're comfortable. I want to circle back to the spiritual, the more woo-woo side too. But Heather shared the most profoundly raw recounting of what it was like to be at the 4th of July parade. I'm going to cry. And I don't know if you got pushback on that. And I kind of wanted to find out how that was received. I know how I took it was, you hit it out of the ballpark. How could you not share that story? Because it's who you are. But I wanted to know, like, it's been a couple of years, but after you shared that, what happened?
I mean, obviously I got an outpouring of support, and it was a beautiful thing. I think the shooting had a lot of layers to it. A lot. There were people who were shot dead. There were people who were shot. There were people who weren't shot, who were, who were front row to blood and turmoil. And then I was 20 feet away, and I was lucky enough with my daughter to run the other direction and not have to see the blood and the despair of dying people with my kid, which I think my lucky stars. But at the same time, it was like, I felt guilty that in where I was placed, where God put me, because the thing is, I had 3 different spots before I landed in that spot. The first spot I was going to sit at with a friend was next to the 2 people who got killed. And my friend was the one who rescued the baby from the parents who died. Mm-hmm. The second place I was planning to sit, I crossed the street, was in front of Uncle Dan's. And that was a number of people were killed there. And then the third place I chose, and Cameron wanted to, she was so annoyed with me. She's like, why do you keep doing this? And I was like, because I never sit at the parade. I'm always in the parade and I want to have the best seat. And so I was like, I had chosen all of these different seats. And so that's where we landed. And it ended up saving some other people's lives too, because they ended up meeting me there versus where they were originally standing. And when I left my phone and I just took my daughter, and the minute I realized what was going on, which was, people started screaming, there's a shooter. After we thought that there were fireworks, then some started screaming, there's a shooter. In my mind, I was like, here we go. This is it. I knew it. I just knew at some point in my life, I was going to be put in this situation. And I just picked her up and I threw her inside of me. And I had a couple of decisions to make. One was to go on the street where there was nobody to get away faster. But the problem was in my mind was that I would become a bigger target. I would get away faster, but I would also be easier to shoot. The other was to go on the sidewalk in the stampede, but I might not get away as fast, but I would also be in a stampede. The other was to go into Central Cafe. And Central Cafe, I didn't know at the time. I thought there were a number of shooters. There was no way there was one shooter in my mind. So I was like, okay, I go into this cafe, I'm going to get captured. It's not the word, but I'm going to get stuck there. And then the shooter's going to come in and kill us. So I had to get away. So I just said in my mind, I'm going to take a risk. And I just kept going towards Green Bay Road. And when we crossed the street, right before he crossed the street, he reloaded. And I was just praying that no one was on Green Bay Road. I thought maybe that they were waiting on the other side of Green Bay Road. And I was, I was in a situation where I just had to pray that they weren't. And then I got across the street and I felt like I was going away from the shots at that point. And so I put Cameron down and she just looked at me and she said, Mom, I've learned about this in school. We run far, we run fast, and don't look back. And I was like, she is saving me. She is saving me. And so when I returned back very quickly after to see if I could get my phone and get my keys once everything had settled down, and I saw so many, it was invaded by media. And I was so, fucking annoyed with all the media. I thought it was this circus of, and there was such tragedy. And what was the purpose of it? Was just another, and here we were the next place on the map. They have taken over Highland Park. This is my home. This is my place. This is where I frequent every day. You guys are invading my privacy in our darkest hour. And I was so, and actually I remember Kamala Harris, I had kept going back because I wanted to get my phone, which I had not had for days. And Kamala Harris came. None of that did anything because it's not solving the problem. So I did. I put that up because I thought, you know what? One person sees this, or if I can just change one person's life, or I could make some sort of impact for people to see the raw, horrific feelings that you go through as a person, as a mom. The whole thing was so, horrifying. And I have lots of other words for that, but I'm going to be polite.
That's okay. It's an explicit podcast. You can just go
Great.
off.
So it was very fucked up, and it was just all of it was just so god awful. And so that's why I just put myself out there. And I thought to myself, there is for sure going to be people who are like, well, she wasn't hit. Well, she didn't die, or she didn't get, so she must, like, who is she? But like, I am just whomever anyone else is. And that was what I was feeling in that moment at that time. And so I put it out there, and that was it. And I just didn't look back.
One of the parts that I remember, despite your raw and real emotion, was, that you said your daughter had gone through these drills like our kids have had to go through these drills. Back in our day, it was just tornado drills and you hide under a desk, as if that's going to do anything. But our kids who are now forced to, because of the world we're living in, go through these shooter drills. She saved your life. And you said that. And also, I don't remember if you said this, it's for sure what I thought. What a fucking huge burden for your daughter to have to bear, to save her mother in a world that should be saving her. And that pissed me off. That pissed me off a lot. And I don't have a solution for it. And, hopefully there will be in our lifetime, So thank you for sharing that story. No. And then the other thing I wanted you to share too, just because of the work you're doing, and I think it's helpful when our kids go to college or from college to getting jobs, they're told to take all their social media down, don't have any red cups, don't make mistakes on social media, you can't recover from it. And you had a mistake that happened.
Yes.
And you shared about it. So if you'd like to talk about that, what you learned from it.
No, so last week, I am a pretty consistent LinkedIn poster. And last week I wrote a post on LinkedIn about, I think it was like 5 or 6 ways for Gen Z to get comfortable being in the workplace. And it was about punctuality. It was about communication. And one of my bullet points was eye contact. And I said, when you're in a meeting, you should have eye contact, and it makes a difference to connecting with people. And what I should have said was, you put down the phone, you need eye contact. But instead, what happened to me was I had a lot of people who are strong advocates for those who are neurodivergent come at me real hard about that. People who are neurodivergent have a really hard time making eye contact. And so they went really hard at me about it. And I said, listen, I was not including neurodivergent people, but I apologize that you took it that way. And I wasn't thinking in that way. And so I can see how you could think that way. That was not my intent, but I understand how that must have upset you. I am going to edit the post, but also, I had one person who is a strong TEDx person, speaker, speak about or talk to me over the post and educate me. And we had a really thoughtful conversation, so much so that we linked in together, and I like her content. And I learned just some things about those who are neurodivergent. And I am very keyed into those who are neurodivergent. I have my own, but it was really easy to attack me. I mean, people who just saw the attacking starting, then just hopped on and went at me even harder on, well, people don't need to be punctual. And how dare you tell us whether it. So it became this, like, once they saw that the prey was being eaten, more people just, and I tried to really stay above board and be very respectful to everybody's opinions. But then at some point I said, you know what? I'm done responding. I made a mistake. I owned it. And I was very public about it. I did not shy away with it. But you have to remember that the person on the other line is a human being. And when people, as they call them, get keyboard courage because they see someone else being preyed on and they just want to jump on for shits and giggles, it is a really terrible thing to be the attention of. But also, you just can't believe that people are capable of talking and treating others that they don't even know like that, with that kind of malice and those kind of words. So I thought, you know what, this is a moment. I'm having a moment. I've had a lot of anxiety about it all day. I've been kind of attacked all day, and I'll share it because you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make more mistakes. Like, I know that. But it's how you own the mistakes. It's not pointing the finger and saying, how dare you think I thought that? Like, I was, you have to have an honest conversation about it.
Well, and thank you for sharing that as well. And I'm sorry that you had that experience. I'm really grateful. It sounds like you made a couple of friends out of it and you certainly learned from it, which is what we hope people allow us to do, which goes to something that we identify as intention, right? So you see me wearing this intention stick, but there's pieces of paper inside this that are things I'm already working on or want to bring towards me. There's 22 different words that we can put in here. Usually it's like 2 or 3, but there's 22 that come. And from the spiritual woo side that I connect with you through yoga, knowing you, and I know your intention is to not harm. It's hurtful when we know how we operate in our world with that intention, married to a physician. So first, do no harm, right? And then it just takes one little tiny, like you said, one little moment. And now the piranha come and you're reeling with, don't people know who I am? And in fact, no, they don't. So that comes to, how do we know ourselves? And so in that way, I'd like to ask you, just from a spiritual standpoint, how is it that you, maybe in this moment is a good example of it, but how do you genuinely or generally work from a place of intention and or find your grounding and your center when the world is going cuckoo crazy, Cocoa Puffs all over you?
So there's 2 people that I would say are the ones who ground me the most. My mom really taught me spirituality. She's Buddhist, and she taught me that there's no such thing as a coincidence. She taught me how to look for signs. She taught me about being grounded, about all of that, which then the way she was introduced was through meditation and then yoga, whereas I've kind of gone the opposite route. I went yoga and now I'm getting into meditation.
That's great.
And so she's given me that base foundation to know that there's way more going on here than just, what I see. But the other big pieces is my therapist, who I've been seeing for 15 years. She is just as woo as she is therapy, and very much in the practice of talking about, we actually, every time we meet, we do breath work, we ground, we talk about, how I'm not good right now at it. I need to be better. I need to be more mindful about grounding myself. But she said something to me in our last conversation, which was just a few days ago. She's like, you have it in you. You just got to remember to just honor it and find it in your daily life, because things are just so running on such a high pace. But then when you do slow down, but I have to tell you, just this whole experience of starting this company, the minute I put it out there, I could just see it. I could just see that there's so much greater going on, so much greater working going on. I'm just noticing little things that I just say to myself, that's interesting. Like I'm on the right path. I just keep being reminded in certain little ways by whomever that I am on the right path, and just to keep going. So
yeah. Well, that's great. I would just offer you a tip, just if I may.
Yes,
mom on you. First of all, I want to meet your mom. She sounds super wicked cool.
Well, she opened the first yoga studio in Highland Park for children. My mom, the very first one. She opened it on September 11th, 2001, while I was living in New York City. It was her first day. And so she also built the curriculum out with another gentleman. His name is Jai Luster. And the whole District 112 uses this. It's called the Calm Classroom. And my mom and Jai partnered on the curriculum and they all use it. So when my kids are like, they will say every day, let's do our Calm Classroom and let's ground. It's my mom and Jai came up with the curriculum.
I love that. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Okay, back to this.
So mudras are hand gestures, that. Yep. So Gya and mudra connect the individual to the universe. And I tell my clients and tell my students, this is just one of the best ways. You can even do tapping, people do tapping, but I do it in traffic. You can do it underneath the conference room table, underneath the dinner table when things are getting heated. It's just one way. You can just take 5 deep breaths. Nobody knows you're doing it, but it's just that little piece that you're not alone and you've got this because you've got yourself, right? So that's one way I ground. If I can't take off my shoes and stand out in my grass, if you walk by my house certain times of the morning, you'll see I'm like a divining rod out there. Like people think I'm playing fetch with Sophie, but I'm kind of just like asking yes, no questions also.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I love it. I love it.
So that's something.
I love it. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that.
It's just such a nice reminder.
Sure.
The ujjayi breath, I call that mother bear breath. Sometimes I'll use it when I really need to bring that out. And that the vibration definitely calms me down. All right. So at this point, I want to say thank you so much. I feel like I could talk to you forever. And I'm going to put everything in the show notes below, but just tell everybody, because I had started off talking about Talent Maven and then you morphed into, but I'm not sure you ever really promoted your actual name of your business. So go for that and all of your socials and all that.
Yeah, it's Adulting 101 Masterclass. And you can find that on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok. All of the content that is on Instagram, it gets fed to Facebook, and I don't put everything on TikTok. So I like to say Instagram is really like the main hub for me. It's hard, like making sure all the socials are aligned. But I am also, it connects to the Talent Maven. And the Talent Maven, I work with companies to help them find talent. I don't work with individuals to help them find jobs. I work with companies to try and help them find people. With Adulting 101, it's specifically focused on college grads. That I do help coach kids into finding a job. I don't find the job for them, but I can coach them into that. But then I also have webinars, which is an all-encompassing about adulting, financial literacy, finding a job, mental health, all of that. And then I'm hoping to eventually build a community for these individuals where experts can come in and help give their advice as well in particular areas that I am not as experienced in. So Adulting 101 Masterclass, that is my website, and you can find me there.
All right. I want to say thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was such an honor. And I love talking with you.
Oh, we'll have to do this again for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauri. Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Yeah.